I am so excited to have on Christie and Bryan today. We're going to be doing a two-part on this episode. So everybody grab your journals. We're going to start with, this is exciting having the both of you at one time. We're going to start with your story as a couple and what you have been going through. And then we're going to excuse Bryan, sweet Bryan, who just made me laugh. And we are going to have on Christie. And the reason why is because, like I was just talking with the both of you, we so often have a partner that is going through something that's extremely traumatizing. And we sometimes forget that there's this other person that is the supporter, right? That is having to hold space for an awful lot of people within the family. And I know that was myself included. And if I could have found more people to talk to about that, it would have been extremely helpful for me. So thank you, Christie, for being that person for the people that are going through that right now and the future partners that will also be going through this. So thank you and welcome to the Live Boldly with Sarah podcast. I'm excited to have the both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
It's exciting. I want to start with your story. Give us a little bit about your story, the background, and what's gotten you to where you're at right now.
Bryan,
Honey, you want to take care of this?
No, you go.
Well, I'll start by saying, Sarah, what you said, I think is sort of perfectly crystallized in my and Christie's story, our story, because as your listener, we're going to find out, I was the patient, right? I was the patient. I was the one diagnosed. And so a lot of attention, deservedly so, was on me, getting me better, getting me treated, getting me through the worst of treatment. But what people don't realize, I think, is in a situation where there's a caretaker, a significant other, like Christie, for example, that person suffers just as much, if not more, silently alongside the patient. The patient gets all the attention and they need it because they're the ones going through treatment, like I said, and all of the trauma. But there's as much trauma on the other side. So I'm looking forward to talking about this and for you to talk to Christie after I depart, because it's a really important and yet underserved and underreported angle, to a lot of these traumas, not just medical, but all sorts.
Yeah. It's as my former therapist stated to me when I asked her, I don't understand what's happening to me right now, because I'm not the one that's going through that recovery process of healing the body, the mind, the spirit. And she said, actually, that's not true. Mm-hmm. You are just as much as, if not more, because you didn't know it was happening.
Right.
So Bryan, your body was going through these changes, right? Which we're going to dive into. And for me, I didn't know it was happening. And she equated it to, you have this Mack truck that hits, you're in an accident and your entire family is in the accident. And all of a sudden, all these ambulances and everything comes, and you may not be hurt. The other person, the driver, meaning you, for example, Bryan, you're hurt, and they come and they take you away. And then the partner is sitting there with the children and you that may not be physically hurt, but you're emotionally, mentally, spiritually traumatized by also not only watching your significant other go through this person that you love, and everything else, the pieces that have to get put back together again. Mm-hmm. And there's no one there. And it's like, okay, well, who's going to be here for me now? So dive into your story, Bryan. Tell us a little bit about you and what happened.
Yeah, I'll give the top line. Here's how it works with me and Christie. I'll give you the top line, and Christie will fill in the blanks with all the wonderful details that everyone craves. But the sweeping overview is that just 2 months before we were due to get married in 2009, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. After a few months of worsening symptoms, but symptoms that you could kind of write off as, oh, it's this or it's that, or, I feel a little weird. At the time I was working for a morning radio show, which means I would show up at 5:30 in the morning, and, my diet wasn't the best, my sleep wasn't the best. And so everything that was going on, whether it was numbness on my scalp or on my, numbness on my lips or whatever, was like, I'm not sleeping well, I'm not getting enough exercise, I'm eating, in weird hours, all that stuff. And eventually it became obvious that something's up, I should get looked at. Fast forward to just 2 months before our wedding in 2009, we got diagnosed with this brain tumor. I say we. Now I got diagnosed with a brain tumor, but it is our lives. You know, it's our partnership, it's our union, it's all those things. And just when we should be launching, you know, into a new stratosphere of love and life, you know, this devastating diagnosis comes through. At the time, the first doctor who diagnosed me told me, in these cases, my case with a specific brain tumor, he says, you know, 6 months to a year is pretty much, you know, what you can look forward to in terms of survival. And so that was obviously very jarring and shocking and devastating. But, you know, we made the decision more or less right away that we were going to fight, and we're going to, you know, fight our hardest and do our best and explore every option and overturn every stone. And it was a very long and difficult process. You know, you see me now 14 years later, probably, you know, looking okay. But it was not always like this. It was definitely lows and thankfully highs as well over those ensuing 14 years. But you know, Christie was there from when we were engaged in a crappy apartment. Well, your apartment was nice, honey, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't a luxury apartment. And now here we are, married 14 years with a 6.5-year-old amazing daughter, and living in just the most, you know, beautiful house full of love. It's been an incredible journey.
It's funny to hear him. So like we talk about this ourselves a lot, but we actually haven't been on a podcast or a radio show, honestly, in probably 12, 13 years. Like the Carolla Show, we came on and talked about this when he was first diagnosed, and then he was on the Adam Carolla Show for many years. And then we would have, when something would go wrong, like the fans are very invested in our story and they're just incredible, we would pop back on with like a health update. And that's when I would pop back on. So to hear kind of his perspective on it is really interesting, because we haven't done this together, even though we live it every single day together. The funny thing about like putting the fine details on this is like, you know, the movie Inside Out, as Bryan's talking, like I have very visceral core memories of every single moment that he's talking about. And so, you know, he a bit nonchalantly says, you know, 2 months before our wedding, we were diagnosed and I was experiencing some symptoms. Well, he was experiencing symptoms from December on.
I'm trying not to bum out the audience.
Our wedding was scheduled for July. I'm the detail person, or for June rather. And so he didn't tell me that he was having symptoms until April, which was so it was 2009. It was the recession. He had just been laid off from his radio show because everybody was getting laid off. And
to be fair, the station flipped formats.
It wasn't just Bryan. The station flipped formats to, you know, cost savings. Let's just put on some cool music. Let's not employ hosts for a talk radio show. I was a marketing executive at an advertising agency, and one of my clients was a private jet company who I literally watched in real time fly to DC to ask for more money. And I was like, this isn't going to end well for me. So we both were laid off. And the week I got laid off, we were like out to happy hour with friends because everyone was laid off. And we're like, we're getting married. We've got some savings. Let's just go party. And it was the night that we were out with our friends that he had like 3 beers and stood up from our friend's couch and just absolutely face planted.
I think I had 2 beers. It was tumor was exacerbating whatever, 2 light beers, and it was like a 6-pack.
Yeah, and he just went down, and we went back to my not luxury apartment, and he basically announced that I'm sick, but honey, don't worry.
It was our not luxury apartment.
It was, you had moved in. Well, but we're big on timing, big on all of the puzzle pieces fitting together. And when he announced I'm sick, he also said, but don't worry, I've already done the research, and it's one of these 5 things. And the thing that it's definitely not is a brain tumor, but it could be a mini stroke. And so he like goes through this list of 5 things, and I'm like, 5 things means you've had time to think about this. So how long has this been? I said, oh, you know, since December. And I was like, okay. So then, you know, I jumped in immediately. I'm a fairly action-oriented person, and took the lead on like calling everyone that we knew. Like, luckily my family we're from LA, so we've got some nice connections within LA. to help us, but we got in with a doctor that is in Bryan's book called Shrinkage, which you can talk all about too. But we lovingly called this doctor Dr. Doom because we had no idea it was cancer. Like, he was misdiagnosed with MS first. Then we got to this building in Santa Monica, and they were like, go there. And we had never seen a scan, never seen anything. No one said the words cancer, no idea. They said the word glioma, but don't go home and look it up. Don't go home and look it up. You kids in the internet, just, keep in mind, this was 14 years ago.
Yeah.
And we went home and looked it up and freaked out because it said average lifespan was 12 months. And we went to this clinic and walked in the door, and it said Cancer Center on the door. So that's how we figured out it was cancer, by reading the door. And it was across from Baja Cantina. So I remember watching people having, margaritas and chips and salsa out the window. And like, we were sitting here and just like, what the fuck is happening? Like, what is this? Like, excuse my French.
No, it's totally fine. I get it. I remember the same thing. Anybody that goes, you remember that discovery. You remember that, like, what you have, the discovery, the moment of discovery of life. And then you have this complete disclosure of events that have happened prior to, many of which we didn't know, myself included, that were happening. Right. Then it's like, then you get all the facts. What led up to this? It's almost like looking back and reading the chapter prior to, even though you lived it, but you didn't know that the words were being written because you had no idea.
Yeah.
And so how are you still here? I'm going to just ask the question. What the hell?
Do you mean like how is Christie still in this relationship?
I don't think she's talking to me.
Okay.
This is how I operate with people. I go straight in. I mean, give us the jam. I mean, this is give it to us. This is incredible.
So the confluence of events that led to me still being here today to talk to you, Sarah, is so initially I was doing, so it's an inoperable tumor. The tumor is my brainstem, and they couldn't operate on it, which is a problem. And so they decide, well, the treatment then is radiation and chemotherapy, very standard even today, but back then that was just what you did to a tumor like that. So radiation, chemotherapy, the radiation had really adverse effects. Like, the tumor not only was growing and causing problems, but the radiation was causing swelling in my brainstem, which in a layman's terms, the only way I understand it, it was choking off those vital nerves that control everything. My whole left side was paralyzed. I was on a walker for several weeks, if not months. Christie had to, drive me everywhere, help me everywhere, help me to the bathroom often, in the middle of the night kind of stuff.
Pick him up when he fell, like, not good.
Yeah.
Pick you up when you fell.
Regular falls, which, are, when you can't recover, are not great on the system. And so things were definitely dipping in terms of my, health and condition. And when things got really bad, probably in like August of 2009, a couple months after we were married, my doctor decided, he decided it was time to, in his words, pull out the big guns. The big gun at the time was a new drug that had just been approved on the market, I think maybe 6 months earlier, maybe even less.
It was May. May.
Yeah, it was called Avastin. And it was a new drug used to treat breast cancer and colorectal cancer, but it works. It's not actually a chemotherapy. It's a blood vessel inhibitor. The idea being that it would stop cancer cells from forming new blood vessels to feed themselves, which they need to survive and grow. The effect was dramatic. The turnaround was almost, it certainly wasn't immediate, but the improvement was immediate. I started feeling better. My tumor, you fast forward, a month or whatever it was, started to shrink pretty dramatically. It shrunk by about half on the first scan we got, and continued to, regress ever so slightly over the next 10 years.
Wow.
So, it really turned things around for me. It really saved my life in no uncertain terms. I ended up going off of the drug in like 2018, 2019, when I had a small stroke. And they think that maybe a decade of using that drug might have had something to do with it. So they took me off of it, in which, short order, my tumor started growing again, albeit much more slowly, but we treated that with medication. And it's just been, a constant battle ever since, but things are trending in our favor. So that brings us to today.
Yeah, January 2020 when it started to come back. So right before the pandemic, we went from straight into the pandemic with homeschooling a 3.5-year-old at the time to I was working 14-hour days, leading a very large team at another agency. And Bryan was taping podcasts while 6 months on one chemotherapy, 6 months on another chemotherapy, another 6 months on another chemotherapy. And one or two of them almost killed him in December of 2021. He was down to 130 pounds. He was unable to really move, do anything, complete brain fog. He had hand, foot, and mouth, which for parents, we know exactly what that is, but it caused that internally in his esophageal tract, on his hands, on his feet, it was just a disaster in every possible way, while also being locked down at home. But now we're 3 years from that point, and you've been still on Avastin, you went back on it. But there's, we're facing a new battle coming up in the next few weeks, but he is an absolute hero. He is my hero. I don't understand how he does it, just like he doesn't understand how I do what I need to do. But he's, so in love with our family and vice versa that we just do this together.
What is your new battle coming up?
I just got it's a long story, but I just got a very positive liver function test, a biopsy. It'll allow us to do a brain biopsy that wasn't available to us many years ago. They can do that now with my tumor, which 14 years ago, they wouldn't consider it. You know what I mean? They were like, it's off the table. The risk is too high. Now they can do it and with minimal risk. And that will open up, hopefully, a world of possibilities for treatment that, again, weren't available earlier this year, let alone 14 years ago. So it's Christie's dad had heart issues from birth, basically. He's still alive and outlived his prognosis. But he told me very wisely years ago, he's like, you just got to stay in the game, stay alive long enough for technology to get to a point where they can do things they couldn't do. And it's kind of where we are.
It's amazing. And then he'll go on some sort of targeted treatment based on what we find out from the brain biopsy. But the most wild thing about it is we've essentially, my brother said this to me yesterday. He's like, you've been essentially fighting this monster in the dark for 14 years. And now we're going to get a biopsy of this monster and we're going to know what it is. We're going to know, the lights are going to come on and we're going to know what to call it, which is the most insane thing to me. It was since we've just been fighting this anonymous thing, and also kind of made peace with it. We're very big on gratitude and thank you. You served your purpose. You have taught us everything. Perspective. We have such a different perspective on life than honestly pretty much anyone that we know. But we're gonna know what other types of treatment will become available to us, because it's just not shrinking and it's not going away at the rate that the doctors are wanting. And if we weren't able to do the biopsy, we would essentially be kind of running out of options. But now with the new technology, we have a whole new set of tools in our arsenal, if you will.
The comment that you just made, the statement that you just made, we have a very different perspective on life than most people. I want to dive into that for a moment because I hear that with my heart and soul. I mean, I do too. I have a very different perspective on life. And to see the both of you together going through this together and in this healthy, beautiful way. And I know that we have your ups and downs, and we're going to dive into that, is a true testament for all of us that have unfortunately not had that partner to be able to walk the journey with us the entire time. So I want to commend the both of you on that because it's beautiful to see. It's absolutely beautiful to see. What is your perspective on life? I want to hear this. I want to hear this. Let's dive into that. And then there's something else that I want to bring up that I read recently about somebody going through something similar and they chose to not stay together. And so I want to start with this. What is your perspective on life? If you could give it to your younger version of self 2 months prior to the couple that before they got married, What would you explain to this couple prior to you both getting married, the perspective of life that you were going to get walking through this journey?
Babe, you go.
That's a hard question. I mean, I'll circle around the question by saying, I don't know that I have like a quippy answer for that. I will say that things don't bother us that would bother normal people easily. You know what I mean? Like me especially, but that also could just be my, resting heart rate being a little lower than most people. I don't get worked up at a lot of things. I never did. And especially not now. Like if there's some drama at school with our daughter or with who knows, with a friend or family of ours, is like, I've got bigger fish to fry, and we've crossed more heroin bridges, so I don't get worked up over things like that. At the same time, yeah, I don't know what. It's funny because Christie, I think it was last night, reminded me of a. It's a long story. It's in our book. It's in my best-selling book. It's in the book about how she lost the diamond out of her engagement ring at the hospital while I was getting treatment one day. And you can only imagine how big Cedars-Sinai Hospital is, you know what I mean? And we don't know where this diamond is. And there's people everywhere. It's Employee Appreciation Day. So there's hundreds of people milling about. Yeah. And at one point, this stranger comes up to Christie and like, you look like you're distressed. Is everything all right? And she's like, no, I lost my ring, blah, blah, blah. She's like, the woman says something to the effect of, I think it'll be okay. I think you're gonna find your ring. And then she disappears. Some stranger, and in the movie version of this, that's Christie time traveling back, to herself in 2009, or that's our daughter time traveling back to 2009 to say, like, this is our parents' lowest moment. I'd like to, give them a hug and explain that things are going to be okay. And to answer your question, that 2009 version of ourselves, we're so worried and things were going so poorly at one point. I wish I could give that 2009 Christie a hug and be like, it'll be okay. And I did do that at the time. Granted, I probably didn't seem that convincing when I was on a walker and not able to articulate myself super well. But I did tell, it was a recurring thing in our relationship at the time. I was like, I'm going to be okay. We're going to beat this. I'm going to get better. And maybe it seemed foolish and naive at the time, but I really believe that.
You said since day one, literally, like the joke would just, no matter how sick he was, like he was completely, I mean, you can still hear a little bit of like slur in his left side is still definitely weak, but like he would be like, not paralyzed. It's not funny, but I guess what else can you do but laugh on the couch. Like I had to set up everything around him on his right side if I was leaving for like 5 minutes, literally, with just to make sure he could survive getting whatever he needed. And he would just be like, I'm going to be okay. I'm just slurring it out of his mouth and just literally dying in front of my eyes. And like, I'm going to be okay. He never, ever, ever went a different direction or said, why me? Or why is this happening? Or poor me or poor us? Or this is, I'm going to be okay. And just went with it. I think, you mentioned in the beginning, what caregivers go through is so different. The way that Bryan and I tend to equate it is like when he was radiated or when he's in the fog of chemotherapy and he is battling physically to literally put every single ounce of his strength to stay alive. Like, and that is not a dramatized statement. I'm as clear as can be. So he has I don't want to say the benefit, but he has the benefit of being kind of out of it. And he's in a very acute battle of his own. I have the 30,000 foot view of every single thing going on in our lives, not just watching him, not just watching our daughter, not just dealing with my own anxiety and trauma and pain and friends, all of that stuff. But if I could go back and give the 2009 me version of advice, which I do now to the 2023 version, as when my anxiety spikes, which it does a lot. I said this to my mother-in-law a while ago. I was like, if I look backwards, the moments where literally everything seemed like they were going to fall apart. Like there was a moment where he exhausted his COBRA insurance and then got on a high risk MRMIP insurance that only had $75,000 worth of coverage. And each of his Avastin treatments were like $50,000 and they were every other week. So we ran out of coverage within a month. Then I literally got a job, and we were both out of work for like a year and a half because I was primary caregiver and he was very ill. Within 3 days of running out of the MRMIP, I got a new job. And this job, like, it's the woman who hired me is still one of my best friends. That job led to the other jobs that were like some of the best things in my career, in my life, the best relationships, the best contacts, best connections, best support systems that I've ever had, in addition to our wonderful longtime friends. But the puzzle pieces, if you look backwards, they always fit. They always fall exactly where they're supposed to fall. That doesn't mean I don't panic. Like I'm having a lot of anxiety right now around his brain biopsy. It's amazing. I mean, honestly, it's incredible. But holy shit, my husband's going in for a brain biopsy, and there's a lot of risks involved with that too. And there's a recovery involved with that. And then there's getting through that. And then there's a question around what's next. And is it targeted? Is it immunotherapy? I don't know. So before I let myself go down a rabbit hole, which I can do very easily with the trauma I've experienced, I'm sure, Sarah, you do too.
Yep.
I remind myself, like, hey, deep breath, puzzle pieces, they're gonna click. And also look at the love that you have. Like, our relationship is so strong. Our family, we go with the little three of us, we're so dumb. We go everywhere together. We're this little like loving unit. It's so ridiculous. Like, the cancer in our relationship is literally cancer. Like, we don't fight. We don't scream at each other. We don't lie to each other. We don't hide things from each other. Like, we have a beautiful relationship. We just happen to be battling this other thing.
There's a few things that I want to touch on. Number one, do you believe that you would be this strong as a unit had you not gone through this?
I like to think that yes. Yeah, exactly. I like to think yes in a less acute way. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
we have the benefit. I've said many times about many things, like, you know, I was at work one day. I was in the studio doing the podcast. There was a service vehicle there, like working on the internet or the phones or something. And the guy driving this van backed into my car, and they came in at the break and the show. They're like, Bryan, someone got backed into your car. He's so sorry, blah blah. I literally, it's like, this was 2011 or whatever it was. I'm like, not the worst thing that happened to me in the last couple of years. And our guest, Larry Miller, the comedian, thought that was so funny and so well adjusted. I'm like, what are you gonna do, man? I just beat brain cancer. I don't give a rat's ass someone backed into my car. The insurance will pay for it. It's like inconvenience, but I don't care.
Right.
And
so it's to your point. Yeah, I'd like to think that just who we are, would give us the strength to fight through whatever came our way, but certainly benefited in a weird way from going through this experience.
Yeah. Well adjusted is a really good way of putting it. The reason why I'm asking is because I know for myself, I have this belief that everything is happening for me, not to me.
Exactly.
There's this learning that's happening, this growing, this pulling back of the layers. And it's this deeper appreciation for living because of the things, the experiences that I've had to walk through, right? Including, the loss of my mom this last year. It's different. Like, life is hard. Right? You're going to have the hard moments. You're going to have the trauma. You're going to go through those times that are very, very difficult. And there's this understanding now for myself I'm 10 years out. So I'm coming out 10 years. 2013 was the second major trauma in my life. And I will say that now that I look back at this 10-year mark, turning 50 this year, I'm like, damn, girl. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a pride that I didn't have prior to this, pride for literally, like, I'm walking in pride that I'm here and I survived that. And not only did I survive that, but I'm thriving as a woman because of it, despite that moment that you had too, that both of you had, that discovery moment of, oh my God, where are we? How did we get here? Mm-hmm. And why aren't we just across the street eating chips and dip and drinking margaritas? Uh-huh. Like, what the hell?
Can I ask you a quick question too about that?
Yeah.
So it's funny, like, that there's pros and cons to the chips and dip situation. It's like amazing, but like, people don't know how good they have it until something goes wrong, right? Like, they just don't.
Or how strong they are. Like, there's this other piece to this. It's like, not only how good that they have it, but And there's this like, you're so freaking fucking strong. Like, I'm just gonna call it like, you are, as humans, we literally, every single one of us have this ability to find this inner strength that we had no idea that we have. When we are faced
let
with
me interrupt real quick, just say as a footnote, you're 100% right. I often hope people never have to figure out how strong they are.
Yes.
That, you know what I mean? That means they're going through something extraordinary. But please finish your thought.
Yes, no, 100%, 100%. I would never wish on anybody what I have had to go through. And I also take it as one of the biggest gifts for me to become who I am.
Oh, it's the gift,
It's
right?
the,
Like I also believe this is the journey that we chose for ourselves before we came here. Like, this is what our soul wanted to experience. Like, I'm wildly.
You're kicking ass. I just want to tell the both of you, you're kicking ass and taking names. So congratulations.
You're talking to you.
Showing the world. So
no, both of us.
Both of you.
Go ahead, baby.
I often say, you know, cancer is people. It's a cliche, but I've adopted it as my own. It's the best and worst thing to happen to us. It's the worst for obvious reasons, but at the same time, I never would have written a book, let alone a New York Times bestseller. I never, I've been given the opportunity to speak at conferences and to, employees of incredible organizations and companies. I wouldn't have been afforded those opportunities most likely without, what I've gone through. So, it's and being able to raise money for cancer charities. Like, I don't think I would have been in that position without this. So it's unlocked many doors and opportunities that otherwise I don't believe would have even been possible for me or us.
It's funny to hear you even say that, because those are things that we just like take for granted that we just have done, but like even in my career, which ostensibly should be separate from this, it's not. And I've always brought my full self into my career and the teams that I've led. And I've worked really hard in my career in marketing and advertising to get really senior level. And the teams that I have led, like particularly during the pandemic, if I did not have this perspective and to be well adjusted and to stay calm in really critically awful situations, I wouldn't have, like, my mom reminded me the other day, which is interesting. She's like, you got people through miscarriages, you got people through family members dying, you got people through layoffs, you got people through the hardest moments of their life, and you have no idea what that means to them.
Yeah.
Like you brought people together, and I've done this everywhere that I've gone because of this experience that we've had. But the thing I was going to ask you, Sarah, like, not to derail, but just I have a hard time with small talk. Like, I have a hard time with people who don't, and I don't want to say like, oh, can only talk to people who've had really fucked up shit happen in their life. But like, I've even like kind of moved away from some friendships that I've had from a really long time if they can't get to a deep level. Cause like, I don't give a shit about the surface level stuff. I don't have time for it. Like, tell me how you are. Tell me how you're feeling. Tell me how you like, how are you at your core? And like, let's dive into it and help each other. But I like almost have this like social issue with people who are just want to like chat like high level bullshit. I can't do it. Like, I literally can't do it.
I can't do it either. And you're touching on that's the gift for me. That's the gift of what I've walked through. I know for myself too, what I've realized is that we're here for only a finite amount of time, and we don't know how long that is. And my choice is to live it as I want to and choose to. And so it's experiences over things. That's the other thing. I don't, material items, don't give a shit.
This might be more specific to you two, the high EQ. I know Christie's very high EQ, or it might be a guy versus a girl thing. I love the small talk. Let's after living this and going through it and talking about it all the time, which I'm happy to do. Let's just talk about fantasy football. Let's just talk about movies. You know what I mean? Like, I love the casual small talk. Not that I'm not down for a good deep conversation now and again, but I feel like I live it, if that makes sense. You know?
Yeah, no, I get that too. I totally understand.
There's value in the casual.
It's also the difference between the patient and the caregiver, because the caregiver is also in such a lonely position sometimes.
Yes.
But when you find other people that you can really connect with, who can understand you because you don't have the energy to explain to everybody all the time what's going on. And when you find someone who empathically understands you, wants to get into that with you and wants to hold space for you and vice versa, there's nothing. Some people have surprised me in the most incredible ways, and some people have surprised me in the opposite way. And that's okay. we're just all on different journeys, but like, yeah, it is funny. Bryan's like, I don't want to talk about it.
No, but you are right though, Christie. Like, I don't know if Sarah, if you're aware, if Christie mentioned it at some point in the background, but I'm making a documentary about young adult cancer, specifically humor in cancer. But I've talked to a lot of survivors of who were young adults when they were diagnosed, and it's such a it's so nice to just have that shared background. You know what I mean? It's almost like meeting someone and be able to start on second base. You know what I mean? Not sexually, but you know what I'm saying? Like you're well, maybe sexually, who knows? But you're like you're ahead of the game. You know, you already got this base level of understanding of shared experience of whatever it is, and so you could pick up maybe, as opposed to if I was to explain, you know, what I explained to you, which I enjoyed every single time I met someone, that would be taxing.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's what I mean too when I'm talking about the deep conversation, right? It's like I want to be able to share my experience with that person and have them to have had something similar so that they know how to hold space for that. Bryan, is there anything else that you would like to leave with us prior to us gently and beautifully excusing you so that we can have some girl time?
I don't know. You'd think that I would have more wisdom given all of my experience, but I really don't. I outsource my wisdom to Christie. So you're in for, I'm sure, a good second half. But no, thanks for having me on. I love sharing my story, our story. And if people want to reach out, you know, you can find us on social media, Instagram or whatever. We're very accessible. You know, the book that I wrote as I was just talking about this with someone. Like, the idea was I was just making it for our fans, you know, for our listeners, you know, to give them a laugh or to you know, see what went on behind the scenes for that first year that we were fighting so hard, you know, with the cancer battle. And it ended up really surprising me, and I think us, because people really have found it helpful. People, you know, tweet me or email me all the time, like, oh, my dad was just diagnosed with this. I gave him a copy of your book. My best friend, you know, I didn't know what to do, so I gave a copy of your book. And Christie's in there. She wrote a few things, and if you listen to the audiobook, she reads her parts. So if it's something that is appealing to you, or you think someone in your life might be able to enjoy it or benefit from it, check it out. It's called Shrinkage. And at this point, you know, I'm not getting any sales royalties from it. So I just want people to enjoy, and maybe it'll help them out at a tough time in their lives.
If they're looking for hope or inspiration, read it, and a few laughs.
You do know that the 3 words that were dropped into me, I'm a pretty faith-filled person too. When I was on the ocean paddling on the ocean, going through my trauma recovery, I literally looked up to God and said, if you could give me 3 words to work through this, what would they be? And truth, inspiration, and hope were the words that came through me.
I love that. Yeah.
Wonderful.
There you go.
Well, on that note,
I got goosebumps.
On that note, it's been great to meet you. Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you as well. I'm glad I could make you laugh. Let's go on that date.
Definitely be.
with Christie, obviously.
With Christie, of course.
I'll see you in the living room, honey.
Right.
Hey, if you know any single men, I'm just.
If they're still single,
the ones I know, you don't want nothing to do with. Yeah.
I'm just totally joking.
Oh my God, I love it. Yeah, right. Joking, not joking.
Joking, not joking.
Bye,
Thank
babe.
you, Bryan.
See ya.
Bye-bye.